Give us a countdown.
Welcome back to another episode of Ronin's Den. I have, as always, with me the Dragon X, and we have a very special guest today, Jeffry N. Baker. I'm going to go ahead turn this over to these two guys. Dragon, if you want to take over.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ronin's Den. This is a good friend of mine, Jeffry N. Baker. He has his own tabletop role-playing game company. You can find it on itch.io. Currently going through a little bit of a name change. I'm going to let him handle that. Jeffry, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm, again, Jeffry N. Baker, and where to start? I've been playing games, let's see, for about 30 some odd years now. I started when my two older brothers said when I turned 10 I could play with them. So once I turned 10, they allowed me to start playing games. And since then I've been playing all sorts of stuff, your classics, but we were mainly Shadowrun kids growing up. And then moved into, of course, 3.5, and that became big in the early 2000s, and so on and so forth. But fairly recently, I've been getting into a lot of the indie scene, which kind of spurred me into getting into making my own games. It's been something I've always thought about doing. My friends talked about doing, but seeing once I got onto, frankly, TikTok and meeting other people in the hobby and seeing that things they were creating, I was like, well, I want to do this, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And so that's what I'm doing. I've got my own gaming company, and trying to take all my skills from being an actor and growing up and an animator by day and illustrator, and putting all those things into what I do here.
Nice. All right, question, this is kind of my own personal intrigue. What really is the inspiration behind your gaming company? What made you decide to start your own, and kind of what is the mission statement of your gaming company?
Sure. So kind of like what I hit upon was on TikTok, and this is a shout out to Disaster Tourism. And we just kind of started talking. Yeah, Kirby, and just started kind of talking, and they were making games, and I was seeing what they were making, and I was like, okay, well, I've had ideas, and just started writing stuff and designing stuff and showing it to them, and through their encouragement, I was like, okay, maybe I actually can do this. This isn't out of the realm of possibilities of things I can do. And so I just started working on them. And then in particular, my company, which I named Happy Jack Games at the time, was really about trying to make a game company that really focuses on inclusivity and giving people the space to tell creative stories in an environment where they feel they have the room to create those stories in a collaborative storytelling table, and piggybacking off of each other. Again, I talked about my acting background. Improv is such a big part of that, and telling stories together, which also comes from, I'm a big live action role playing nerd. I've LARPed for a long time, and that's basically a weekend, 3 days of just improvisational theater in a D&D style and fantasy style. So
I did not know that you were a LARPer.
Oh,
I did
yeah.
not know that.
Oh, yeah.
How often do you do that? Curious, how often?
Before my child, we try to get about once a month. You generally have once a month events, and these are 3-day weekends. So you go out Friday night, and you basically camp until Saturday. And there is, instead of a single GM, there is a plot crew. There's about 5 people. You take your turn playing a monster throughout the weekend for about 4 or 5 hours, and you all are telling this grand collaborative story that carries over from month to month, from event to event. And a lot of times there's downtime where you're not being entertained by plot. So imagine you're playing at a table, and the GM says, "Hey, I'm going to go role play with, hey Dragon, I need to go to the next room, and we're going to have a little role play session." And everybody else is left at the table. Well, instead of just being out of play, what if everybody just continued to role play and just in character? And you begin developing your backstories and having conversations and building character connections and deepening those character connections, because, and especially in a LARP setting, you're all in costume. You're sitting in a cabin out in the woods with no technology, nothing to distract you, and you just kind of start continuing to build these stories. And then when you get into plot moments, when you get into story moments, all that stuff that you had been building together at, in the tavern starts to build back up and bubble back up. I mean, I've had, after a big plot event, it was me and one other guy, some crazy stuff went down during what we call a module, which you can kind of think of as like an adventure scenario, right? And me and him, by ourselves, just were having a drag out fight in game. And it was the most fun he and I were having. But just having this huge, and the only people to see it were some plot members who just sat off to the side, like just eating popcorn to see the drama that they have caused. And being that invested is just so much fun. So I want to bring that, to bring it back to tabletop role playing. I want to bring that kind of sensibility to the table, in that we're all working on these stories together. Those downtime moments mean just as much as everything else, and we build on those things. So kind of the mission statement to give I'm sorry, again, we talked about this rambling thing. Yeah, so the mission statement is just, I want to have that safe space for people to play, and the rules support that exploration, and those exploration of your characters and the story at the same time as we all work together. There.
I absolutely love that. I love that mission statement. It sounds incredible. I think Duality even had some looks on his face about it.
Yeah, no, that's actually really awesome. I think a little bit later I want to talk about how you designed the rules to really incorporate that, because you said that was a focus in there. So I want to know, see how you kind of worked that into your creative process for the rules system.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll go ahead and say, to kind of back up, I'd mentioned, Happy Jack Games was the company name. And that was actually based off of, and LARPing, this is why these go together. Jack, J-A-K, is my fiance's character's LARP character, who is actually Mad Jack Madigan. And I wanted to kind of honor her. And the icon was this pumpkin head with moose antlers. And the pumpkin is after my daughter, or our daughter together, whose nickname was Pumpkin. The moose antlers are after my son, whose nickname is Moose. And then Happy Jack just sounds really good. So that's how I came up with that name. Unbeknownst to me, is there is a very large Happy Jack's RPG network, who has been in this space for a while. They don't make games, but they do this really awesome game reviews and really cool stuff like that. But we started getting confused with one another, and so that's what led me to needing to change the name. And I wanted to announce that here on the podcast. We have decided, based on all that stuff I talked about, inclusivity and people meeting and telling collaborative stories together, and feeling welcomed, and all of those things together. When I brought all that those ideas, made me think of camping and sitting around a campfire and everybody just hanging out and telling stories together. And then specifically, there is a game that you play. I don't know if people are familiar with it, where it's a campfire story where you're someone will start the story, be like, I was walking down the woods and I saw ahead of me a wolf, when suddenly, and then the next person picks up the next part of the story. They tell their bit and they end it with when suddenly, and it continues around the circle until you end the story. And so that is what we are calling ourselves, which is When Suddenly Games. And I think that just kind of encapsulates everything that we are about.
Also, want to mention that the new logo is a campfire, and I think that is very symbolic of what you're trying to incorporate. If I've seen it, you've posted it, it's like to be determined. And I want to thank you for announcing that when suddenly on this podcast. It means a lot to us that you did that here.
Thank you for giving me the platform. Talk about it, yeah.
No problem. When suddenly games, I love the message that has, and it fits so well with your mission statement. It almost feels like you're saying when suddenly to the next DM, the next game master to take up the mantle in one of your games. I've ran my game, but when suddenly the Dragon X steps in and he runs his own system, at the end I say when suddenly and duality takes over. I love that thematicness to it, and it really does. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I don't know. I have this fuzzy feeling.
That's because that's when I think about a campfire, right? It's the warmth, it's the camaraderie, it's the friendship, and I want to shout out and hats off to Scarecrow, an acquaintance on TikTok, who's actually wrote one of the monsters that will show up in a game we'll talk about later. The Crypt is Opened. Designed one of the monsters for that. And we were talking, and he was the one just to be like, "Well, what about this?" And I was like, "Well, what have you gotten out of just my Discord channel? Like, what are the feeling you got?" And he was like, "Here's the feelings I get," and he just laid it out there. And that's when we realized, like, well, this feels like a campfire. This feels like this. And so it was through that conversation, getting that outsider's perspective on somebody else being like, "Here's the feelings I get when interacting with your company." And we built on that.
I noticed you do that a lot because I'm in your Discord, and you throw it out to us a lot when you have questions. I've been in playtest groups and I've given feedback, and I like your openness also to accept other people's viewpoints and take them to heart. But please, this is a little aside. We're stepping aside for a second. Please tell me that Scarecrow wrote the Scarecrow.
Yes.
Okay, I was about to say, if Scarecrow didn't write the Scarecrow, there's a problem here.
It's honestly one of my favorite cryptids. I've used it. It's now one of my playtest cryptids I've used quite a bit. Well, the one that I think you were a part of.
Yeah, we were. I was in one of those. But anyway, let's get a little bit back on track now. Honestly, let's get to the part that everyone cares about in this thing. Let's talk about some of your games.
Sure.
You have 3 games on your itch.io. One of them is Weird Dungeon. Another one is one I'd never even heard of till I looked at your website, called The Color of Everything. And then finally the flagship, The Crypt is Open. And that's the one I'm going to save for last. Because I think that's the one we're going to talk about the most. But basically, Weird Dungeon. I've seen you promote it. I've seen you talk about it. So what is it? Sell me on it. Sell duality on it, because I don't think he knows anything about it.
Sure. Okay. If you like OSR, you're going to like Weird Dungeon. So Weird Dungeon is based off of the Weird framework by Disaster Tourism. They were developing it, and I had originally written Weird Dungeon as a 4-page, like I was attempting to do like a 4-page build your own dungeon on the fly book. And it didn't make it because we were trying to do these like ultralight games. It was too big for an ultralight. So I put it to the side. And then when I saw the Weird framework, the early playtest for it, I was like, oh, this is practically my game Weird Dungeon. Like, it's got the bones. I can just make some tweaks and go from there. And so what I set out to do is develop an OSR-style game that requires no prep whatsoever. It can be what we call a GM full game, meaning everybody's a GM, which goes back to our slogan and who we are, which is, everybody is there to tell the story. And we have 11 D66 tables for you to randomly roll on to generate your dungeon. So what you do is you have your table full of players, however many there are. If there are 4 players, you have a table full of factions, and you roll on those factions to see it's the number of players plus one is how many factions are going to be within your dungeon. And then you roll the relationship between each of those factions. So we as the players know the relationship going into this dungeon. That Rogram's fists are mortal enemies with like the Night Sisters or whatever. I can't remember all the names. But you build all that stuff and then go in to build the first dungeon. And we know that, hey, this dungeon, the first level, is going to be the number of... it's 4 rooms plus 1 or something like that, and basically just builds up from there. Each level we add a new room, and it's just like you can either play it as a gauntlet, like we're going to see how far in tonight we can get from room 1 to we all die, or we can play it like a traditional game where we clear the level, we go back, we sell all our stuff, we get all our loot, and then we go back to do level 2. And the only way you gain levels is by getting back to town. So you got to clear the level and then get back to be able to earn your experience. And it's a gauntlet. It's a lot of fun. It's just very loose. It's just almost like prompts, right? Because the level there, you are rolling again on a random table to get the level name. And then you as a group decide, based on the name of the level, what does that mean? What kind of monsters are going to be here based on just the name alone? Because the how you generate monster stats is just like, are they a minion? Are they like a mid-boss? Are they a boss? And their stats are developed from there. What they look like, what kind of special abilities they have, that's up to either the GM or the group to decide. And it's 32 pages. It's real. In fact, I just realized. Ta-da! So this is the book. 32 pages. It's color in the sense that it's black and just these. Went for the very old school chroma blue. For those who know, they know. So
Duality can appreciate that. It looks like an old school first edition or second edition book right there. Duality,
right
that's
now.
your jam.
Yeah.
In the background is basically a grid, like a 1-inch grid for the background. The inside flap, we provide a beginning dungeon layout. If you want to use that, go ahead. And
so would it be safe? Would it be safe to say that this is a game for a group of people with no experience, no GM, just to sit down, they can grab this book and they're playing in a couple of minutes, and it gives them every step of the way what they can do?
I would know, in the sense that I would not say if they've never played a game before, you're not going to have a GM full table. People have never played before. I think that might be a bit too much. You need to have some somebody with enough creative like lead or push to make it really work, right? Because I don't think you're going to really be able to do that. But if you had somebody that's run a lot of games, or is into the OSR scene, they'll be able to pick this book up and run it, no problem. In fact, we have Guild, which is, I'm plugging Kirby like crazy here. Guild, which is also using the weird framework. These two can actually work in conjunction with one another, because in fact, any OSR game you can use this for, because you can ignore all of the mechanics as far as like character creation and leveling and all that kind of stuff, and just use the dungeon builder portion of it. And
so not only is it its own system, it's actually a useful supplement for other systems.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, if you're like, I need a magic. Yes, it's like, I need a magic item or a mundane item. I can roll real quick on this D66 table. I need a level name. I'm going to roll a name. Ooh, that's the Court of the Angelic Song. That's it. And go from there.
So for anybody watching who doesn't know what D66 is,
that's true.
D66 is you take 2 D6s, you roll them, and you have 6 and 4. That's 64. I think it goes from like 2 to 66 is the total you can get. No,
11 to
11 to 66.
Yes, because you could roll 2 1s. That would be the lowest technically. So in this case, the faction on 11 is the Red Grins. You rolled a 64. That's the Unforgiven Knights of the Worm. That would be one of the factions.
I kind of like that.
That's such a kick-ass name.
Yeah.
Like,
thank you.
Read that name to me one more time, please.
The Unforgiven Knights of the Worm.
The Unforgiven Knights of the Worm. My
yes.
God.
I was heavily playing
You're welcome,
Dark Souls. I was playing a lot of Dark Souls during the creation of this book, so Miyazaki had a stranglehold on my brain. So a lot of the stuff gets a little weird that way.
So you mentioned that this is kind of you built off of what disaster tourism had started. Were you creating something of your own prior to that? Like, what was the sequence there?
Yeah, so again, we were doing ultralight, and so originally it was just supposed to be you have 3 stats, your physical, mental, like social, I think is what it was. And you just assigned it either, are you good at something? What are you good at? What are you poor at? And what are you great at? Your poor stat is a D6. Your good stat is a 2d6, and your great stat is a 3d6. And that was it. Like, that was the base of it. And you just roll from there. So it's like, oh, you tried to interact with somebody, you use your social stat. Well, I'm great at that. I roll a 3d6. And I think it was a target number. So real light on that end. But we have, since it's changed a lot on that side of things. What's the biggest difference I will say between this game and Guild is our social mechanic in this. It's called Beguile. And you actually have points per level to spend to just automatically convince a faction or a group of monsters to sway them on your side. I think it's called sway. You have sway points. So if you pump enough points into that, and it's a monster with a D4 hit die or 4 hit die, I can spend 4 sway to be like, hey, help us out against this other faction, or help us do this other thing, and that monster will be like, oh yeah, cool. So there's a bit of a meta currency on that regard. Sure, you could roll for it, but this just gives people a little bit more of that, like, I built a talky character. I should just be able to talk. Like, I should have at least enough charisma to not make this a problem. So we kind of wanted to show that.
You mentioned that you were really deep in the Dark Souls while you were making that. Does that show in just the general atmosphere, or also the difficulty level players can expect while playing? Because Dark Souls is known for its difficulty.
I think just the name. It's atmosphere and naming stuff. Okay. It's about taking the idea of Miyazaki, which is like, I just want to give you the prompts, and you figure out the lore from there based on these very evocative pictures and names. What story are we telling here based on just the environment alone? And I think that's why you really wanted to make sure all the faction names, all the spell names, all the level names are just like, why is this level, this opera house, if you want to say it, why is the opera house below the tomb? It's like one of those, because you're rolling randomly, and that's, would I have normally put those two near each other? Probably not. But now that they are, this is what we randomly rolled. We now have a creative prompt. We have a limitation, which always breeds creativity, and I think ends up having a stronger story because of it, and something far more interesting.
Definitely agree with the limitations create or spawn creativity. I guess for anybody listening, where can they find the Weird Dungeon? Where can they get that book that you just flapped in our face?
I want the book.
So Exalted Funeral has physical copies, as far as I'm still aware, or Cave Evil. There's the 2 online stores. If you want to check them out, you can just type their name into Google, they'll pop up. If you don't care for having the physical book, you just want a digital copy, you can go to playroll.com. We are partnered with that virtual tabletop. And if you go to Playroll, you can buy the book for $10, a virtual copy. And that also comes with free images for you to use to show to players. It comes with digital character sheets, automatically ready to go, and a room, and you can jump in and start playing. Those are the three places I would say. And if you buy a physical copy, and if Exalted Funeral or Cave Evil doesn't have the digital copy for you, please email me, Jeff at winsuddenly.games, and I will get you a digital copy. So it is our mission that every physical copy comes with a digital copy. You're not going to be left out on that.
And if for some reason you can't get a hold of him, message me. I can get a hold of him pretty easy.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
So, also, it's on his itch.io as well. That's where I got my PDF copy as well.
That's true.
But anyway, Weird Dungeon sounds amazing. I love the prompts. I love that you can basically just sit down with a group of people and make a dungeon, and you're playing. It's fantastic.
And then finally, I do want to say, because we are about accessibility, if you go to Weird, that's WYRD-randomizer.com, we have a complete digital randomizer that does have everything in the book, all of the tables. You just pop in how many number of players and hit generate factions, and it'll generate all the factions for you. You hit generate level, it'll give you the level name. We have all the buttons, everything goes. So I know it's kind of giving away the book a little bit, but again, I just believe in accessibility and in making things as easy as possible, because a lot of people don't want to sit around and just roll a bunch of dice. That can be pretty cumbersome. But if you're generating a lot,
want to sit around and roll dice,
right? Like, I miss sitting around just rolling big handfuls of dice.
I get it, but
I got so excited when you said Shadowrun. I'm like, how can you not like rolling dice if you say Shadowrun? You typically roll 30 dice a minute just to do a simple check.
It's we're all rolling dice to wait for something to happen. Like it can bog things down a little bit if we're all generating the level. But this, we can just hit a button. Especially as a GM full game, it's just hit the button and we all run. So
I feel like more companies should do that. Like if you play the Borg games, Morkborg, Pirate Borg, they have all that stuff online for free. You putting it online for free, I feel I've always been the type of person that when I want something, I want to preview it. I want to see what it is, and then if I like it, I want to pay for it. But because I know a lot of tabletop role-playing games, I'll look at them and like, that looks really cool. I don't want to wait. I don't want to risk the money on it for me not to like it. And when you have something like a generator online that I can go, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah, I'm going to go support them because I want them to make more of this. So I feel like that is always a good option.
Yeah, and it's if people are, it's one of those things like if people are going to steal your stuff, they're going to steal your stuff. You gotta go, but it doesn't matter to help those and anybody run a game better. It doesn't hurt me to help people. And so like we were just talking, so I hit generate level. So the level name is the factory. We have trappings, so all the portcullises, they drop behind any door you enter, so I know that. Traps, illusory floor covers a spiked pit, an acid pool, or a snake pit. We can roll a d3 to decide which those are.
Why did it have to be
the enemies... Why snakes? Yeah.
Why snakes?
Enemies, honor-bound orc. It would be an enemy you could run across. And then decorations, you meet an adventuring party torn to bits. So I hit generate, and I have all that information ready to go. before
Can
the
you
players
say
go.
that website one more time just for everybody?
Yes. Weird-randomizer.com. That's WYRD.
Beautiful. That awesome. I think everything that needs to
Yeah.
be said about Weird Dungeon has been
Oh,
said.
wait, actually,
Go.
almost. Everything in Weird Dungeon is under the Creative Commons BYSA 4.0 license. That includes all the rules, and actually, for me, all the pictures, everything in this book, everything
Oh,
is
beautiful.
available for people to pick up and generate off of it. Yeah, sorry, that was the last thing.
That's all good. All good. All right, Jeffrey, this is one I know nothing about. I've not looked into it. I just know it exists. What the fuck is the color of everything? Like, the name intrigues me, but then I looked at the cover and I'm like, what the fuck is this? So, what is the color of everything, man?
Sure.
I
So the color of everything is actually what made it into the ultralight. What are they called? Game Jam. That's actually what I submitted to the Game Jam. The color of everything, and essentially it is. You have a world called. Oh no! You had to remind me.
I think it was like
It's been so.
Chromia or something,
Yeah,
wasn't
I
it?
think it's called Chromia. And there is a being called Discordant who is trying to take the color away from everything and make everything gray. This is a game about you playing artists because I wanted to make a game that I knew a lot about as far as art is concerned. You either play an animator, an illustrator, a musician, or a sculptor. You pick one of those classes, and you are all playing an artists collective trying to fight against Discordant and monsters such as missing frames, which are, they move where like a frame of them is missing. They jerk around because they're missing it. If they moved at 24 frames per second, all of a sudden they're missing frames 11, 12, and 7. But it takes an illustrator to add those frames, or sorry, an animator to add those frames back into them and cure them and free them of the affliction. And so it's really about all working together in your artist collective. And it was a very simple, again, 4 pages. You can go to the itch.io. I don't know. I think that one's $2, something like that. It's fairly cheap. It might be free now. I can't remember. Pick it up. I'm sorry.
When I was on there a couple days ago, it was free. So.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
And that actually had the system where you had inspiration. You had your 3 stats: inspiration, creativity, and confidence, I believe it was. And you choose one of those is good, one of those is poor, one of those is great. You put your D6s in and go from there. What's an interesting mechanic with that, though, is there is the Muse die. One of those is one of your die. If it's the D6, it's the only one that's the Muse die or whatever. If you fail a roll, I believe, that number on the Muse die generates Muse points and gets put into the artist's collective. It's a pool of points in the middle of the table. And then at any point, a player on a failed roll can actually decide to pull points out of the artist collective. They go to the Muse to actually pass the roll. So if the target number was a 6 and I rolled a 4, I can decide, well, I'm going to take 2 points out of the artist collective. I'm going to go to the Muse, and actually, I now have a 6. I added a +2 to my roll. And you can do that as much as you want. However, every time you pull points from the artist collective, you are giving those points to the GM. And he now has those points to, forget there's a term, the escalation meter starts going up. And I think once the escalation meter hits 6, all target numbers go up by 1. And so if the more you start going to the well of the Muse, the more you're relying on the Muse, the harder and harder things get for you to be creative because you're relying on this external factor to do your artwork. And so that's kind of how it's thematic and also fun little mechanic for players to pull through and all that kind of stuff.
I like that.
At first, I was like, I'm not sure about this. It's a cool concept. Then you tell me that, and I'm like, he's hooked me. He's got me. Jeffrey got me again. He's got something in there that I like a lot.
It's a combination. I'll tell you that it's a combination of the age system stunt point kind of thing, where they have the dragon die, and the what's it called? The Genesis Force, whatever it's called. In Star Wars: Edge of the Empire.
Oh, okay. The light and the dark.
Yeah, it's a combination of those two things, really, that kind of led to the inspiration for that. And to kind of create something different, I wouldn't say new, obviously, because it uses those as inspiration, but it takes those two ideas as like, well, how can we combine these to make this thing work? So while that is being worked on, it's actually in development again to potentially move it to a Powered by the Apocalypse style, where we have moves. We're still keeping the Muse die, like all that's staying in there. But I'm actually working on integrating the color wheel as emotional states of your character. And whenever you perform a move, you assign it an emotional state. Are you doing it angry? Are you doing it happy? Or however, you're doing these things. And that may alter the difficulty, or kind of. This is the thing I'm still kind of messing with, but it may alter what kind of moves the GM can use against you. And then if you are working with another player whose emotional state is opposite yours, you may come into conflict with one another, and that's where we pull in a lot of what makes PBTA a lot of fun. Is those character interaction moments where you may be in conflict with each other emotionally, and builds a lot of role play off of that. And you can then go up and down in your color wheel on your various colors how saturated it is. So the more saturated it is, the more color there is, you may have a +2 to that roll. But the more desaturated it is, you'll have a negatives to those rolls. And once your character is gray in all emotional areas, they're out of the game.
Okay.
Because you basically have had your color removed.
So Discordia, the bad guy in this game, is it kind of like an actual entity, or is it more of like a abstract, and you're just artists trying to make the world colorful, but you don't really know that there's an outside force trying to make the world plain and bland? Or is it kind of like that it's this entity, or do you know it's there and you're actively trying to fight it?
Originally, we do have stats for it was just like, here's Discordant, in the game jam. But that's the thing. Yeah, it could be. I haven't. It's one of those things that as it's coming out of the game jam version and being broadened out, that's now going to give me room to be like, what does that actually mean? What are we trying to do here? And obviously, I could just be like, it's capitalism. And capitalism's the bad guy.
I'm getting strong, never-ending story vibes. It's like the Nothing and the Wolf.
Yeah.
Like, which is the enemy? Is it the Wolf or is it the Nothing?
Right. Oh yeah, sure. And there's probably people working for Discordant, which, like you're saying, is not just be the Nothing, and the people working for the Nothing or Discordant are the Wolf. And what I'm currently doing is trying to wrap my head around PBTA, because it's something I've only seen played. I haven't played, and it's just like, wow, trying to understand moves and play to find out, and like, what does all that actually mean is interesting.
if you're not used to PBTA can be so, I don't even know the word. Like,
It's different.
if you don't,
Yeah.
if you don't know it and you haven't done it enough, like I've been playing Masks for 2 years with Improv GM and all them. PBTA is second nature to me at this point. Like, I know what it is. I've played it. I understand it. But for someone who has never played PBTA or who has never really like been in a long-term game, making a PBTA game, that's gonna be tough. I commend you for that.
Oh yeah, I'm that's why I haven't made much progress on it. I'm trying. I'm like, I need to actually play this, but I have ideas because what it comes down to is what's the gameplay loop, and I think Masks has a pretty good what's the gameplay loop. Is written there because it's a supers game. We always know eventually you got to introduce the anti-hero or the villain or whatever, and it's like, well, what is it? What is that here in the color of everything? Yeah, we have the discordant, we have these things, but what does that actually mean, and how does that manifest? And what does the session to session look like? So that's what I'm trying to work through with the color of everything. But you can get the base game free, super simple, have fun. Go fight discordant or wait for whatever eventually comes of it.
All right, and now we're gonna get to the one I've been dying to get to. I've play tested it with you. I've given you feedback. It is one of, even in its beta version, it is one of my top 5 favorite tabletop role-playing games I've ever played, and that is The Crypt has opened. You have a shirt on for it. It is fantastic. It is an amazing game. I absolutely love it. Jeffrey, where did you come up with the idea for this game? Like, how did you sit down and think, okay, the apocalypse didn't come with a bang or an explosion, but with the crypt opening and all the cryptids you could ever imagine come funneling into the world to end the world and bring the apocalypse? Like, how did you do this?
So this is probably, we're talking about the color of everything. This was an artist's and a creator's dream of how things happen. So when it first started out, I've always wanted to create a game that was 2 wizards dueling each other and what that actually looks like. But an active, way of dueling, so it's not just like, oh, I counterspell. Okay, next, it's like never felt right. You wanted to be like, well, I'm lowering a percentage. I want to do something but also still be casting spells at the same time in this weird push and pull. I didn't achieve that goal with this game, but that's where it started. And for some reason, I was like, well, I got out 3d6, and I just sat at my table and started rolling dice. And I went, it would be cool. What if one of these dice removed another one? It just took it away, and this is whatever dice I'm left with, that's my result in a number. And I just started rolling, and I was like, wow, this feels a lot of fun. I really like this. And again, I'm talking with Kirby at the time, and like, hey, this is kind of my germ of an idea. Oh, that sounds really cool. Keep going with that. And then I was like, well, what if we change the die type? And I just started messing with that. And then it was as I was rolling these dice, it was just like a bolt of lightning. Cryptids are cool. What if I was a wizard fighting cryptids? And it just snowballed from there. And it was just like, well, what if the cryptids took over the world? And then, as I sat down and started writing that stuff, that's when that first line just came to me, which was, the apocalypse came not with a bang, but with an exhalation of a crypt door. And it is to me what evokes the idea, the feeling of everybody's used to the apocalypse, fallout, those kinds of things. Everything explodes. It's this huge whatever. But I want to evoke that, and then the world just goes to shit.
Where you want to invoke that campfire, storytelling of where it's not some big explosion, it's the creepy, the eerie, the fog coming forth as a monster emerges.
Everybody leans in to hear the next thing.
So I'm completely
to hear the description of what's coming.
Like I haven't read the book yet. I just picked it up tonight off the itch.io. With this apocalypse, like the crypt opening and this stuff, was it gradual, or is this like an all of a sudden the world is gone?
It's like it's just being overrun, right? Okay. So all of a sudden, literally, crypt doors become to literal doors erupt out of the ground. They come up out of the ground. They open up, and spirits and what's called the mist, MIST, starts to pour out of them. And malevolent spirits and cryptids start to come out of these things. And, people don't know how to handle it. Just one night. And the good thing, however, is magic was amplified to the nth degree. And humanity realized, oh, wait, we can fight back. It took a minute to realize that before a lot was lost. And now you are playing magical practitioners fighting back and pushing back the crypt.
Okay.
And trying to reclaim what we call the dead spaces of the world, which is like most of the flyover states, most of the Midwest has just gotten taken over. Because, you're lightly populated areas that don't have the infrastructure to push back against this kind of stuff. Major cities had a bit easier time. And you can decide when you play this game, do we want to play in a major city or do we want to range out into the dead spaces of the world to try to reclaim it? And this is where it's a combination of Stephen King's The Stand, if anybody that have read that, and Tales from the Crypt. So put those two ideas together. It's campy horror, grindhouse horror, but with that dread of some entity, something that has completely taken over and overshadowed everything. And we walk out into cities that have been completely taken over, but we're going to try to rebuild humanity as best we can while pushing back against this horror and this dread.
So, Jeffrey, you were talking about the rolling of the 3 dice. I guess now's a good time to talk about that system. It is called the imposition dice system. It's something I've never seen before. I think you are genuinely the creator of it, and you explained how it came about, but explain it to anybody out there who might want to understand exactly what you mean by that. The imposition dice system, how does it work?
Sure. In short, the imposition dice system is a system where the GM sets what they call the imposition die against the player. That's the difficulty. So in any other game where if I said, oh, you're looking to roll a difficulty 7, say it's a target number system, right? You have to roll a 7. They've established, you could say, the imposition. They're imposing something against the player, right? They're setting that thing. Well, in this, instead of just a hard number, it's a die type ranging from a D4 to a D12. The player then rolls 2 dice. In this case, in this game, it is their spell die, which is equivalent to essentially their level. How powerful are you with magic? Ranging again from a D4 to a D12. And then they use one of their magical paths to that corresponds with whatever magical spell they're trying to cast. There are no spell lists in this game. It is a collaborative storytelling, narrative storytelling game. So you tell me what kind of spell you're trying to cast. We find a spell path and an aspect of that spell path that matches what you're trying to do. And then based on how you've narrated what you want to do, we'll determine how difficult that thing is to accomplish. And we have that conversation. So here's one of my favorite examples. Really early on playtests. Somebody was like, I want to rewind time. And I'm like, okay. It's like, well, I'm using my ritual magic and my die type. And I was like, okay, well, that's a D12. That's the as highest imposition you could possibly make it to be. And if you fail, we'll see what happens. They failed. Time didn't rewind. It sped up instead, and it was an Ozark Howler, which is basically, if you're not familiar with an Ozark Howler, it is, imagine a giant bear with horns and human hands. It like was loping towards them, and the next it was on top of them. Like, rah! It's like, oh no. So the imposition dice system is about that imposing dice against the player. And they are trying to get their 2 die to roll higher than that imposition die to be successful. If
Isn't it if both are higher, it's a success. If one is higher, it's a partial. If both are below, it's a failure.
Failure, yes. And that's actually a change. So it's interesting. I want to talk about two people developing something that almost are the same independently of each other. So Ironsworn is a game that I was not aware of that does something very similar. It was somebody. I'm not going to remember their name, but they're on the +1 EXP server, and they helped me go through this. They're like, "This sounds like Ironsworn. You should check it out." Ironsworn uses 2d10, and you're trying to roll, get one of those 2d10 higher than, I think, the target number. If both are lower, you fail. If one's higher, partial. If both are higher, you succeed. But they only have 2d10, and they have modifiers. Originally, my system, it was a little convoluted for people, and when we switched over, everybody picked it up much quicker than it originally was, which was you actually used to add your spell and path die together, and that had to beat a target number.
I definitely prefer the system you have now.
It got really weird, I forget how. Oh no, I'm sorry. I take that back. See, even I forget because it was bad. If the imposition die was greater than one of them, it took it away, and then you looked at the value on that die to establish if you succeeded. So it was a 1 through 3 was a failure, 4, 5, and 6 was a partial success, 7+ was a full success. This is very Blades in the Dark inspired kind of a thing. If
I can definitely say I like what you did better.
Yeah, I'm not going to go through the rest of it because there's a lot of math involved that did not need to be involved. You should just look at.
I feel like your game is not mathy at all, and I really like that. That it feels like, because I struggle with math, even the simplest of math. The other day, I had to add 9 + 7 and came up with like 25, and my friends are like, "No, that is not right, Steve." Like I had to add 2 together like 6 times and came up with 24 in my D&D game on Wednesday. I'm bad at math. I'm horrible. So any game that makes me have to add like little stupid modifiers, I don't like. This game, it's simple. Okay, this is a 6. That's a 7. My imposition dies a 3. Ha! I succeed.
Yeah. Wee.
Like, are both of them higher? It's perfect. Yeah. But I love the imposition die system. I think it is so elegant yet so simple. Like, I don't know how nobody came up with it before you. But now that I've seen it, when you publish this game, I think it's going to be copied. And that is me praising you right now. I 100% believe that people are going to look at the imposition die system and go, okay, I'm stealing that. And
I hope so. I mean, I would like to, if you can be the next Blades in the Dark, if you can be the next Forge in the Dark, I think that's what a lot of people write. You want to be the next PBTA. That's what a lot of people, I think, are gunning for. And obviously so, right?
I think you've got it.
Well, I hope you're right.
I'm not saying this to like butter you up or anything, but there are very few games that I play that the minute I'm in a playtest or the minute I play a one shot of it, I'm like, this is my new favorite game. I am going to play this game for the rest of my life. And your game, The Crypt is Open, was that. Like, I played that one scenario with you with the Scarecrow, and I'm like, this is amazing. I will always play this game. And I love every little detail of it so far. Next thing I want to talk about, the town building. Before you even start playing, we build a town. We create basically the world, the town we're going to play in. We come up with all this different story element that informs the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a framework, like you said, limitations spawn creativity. We sit down as a group. Like, the one town we made, we were the only place in the world that still had a McDonald's. Like, what is unique about your town? We have the only McDonald's left in the world. Like,
all right. Yeah.
Whatever. The next one. What is unique about your town? We're a bunch of raiders who beat the shit out of everybody and take their stuff. There's about 100 of us left. Like, the two different towns we made when I was in the playtest are so dynamically different. It's incredible. Like, how did you come up with this idea of let's build a town before we do anything?
Straight stolen from Kids on Bikes and Kids on Brooms. Like, I read that and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Right? You just for that reason, it fits into the collaborative storytelling. It fits into what I'm trying to accomplish. We're all building something together. And like you said, once everybody as a group gets that stuff written together, we all have a shared experience prior to the game. We all have a shared interest in the game, right? We have a reason to be there, a reason to care. You're not just being like, you're 4 Jagoffs that met in a tavern, go. You know, you get what you need out of it. And go ahead.
I think the one person that said the phrase she used, it was Nessa. I love Nessa. She's one of my favorite people in the world. We did that one shot with her. We made the town. While we're playing, she made the statement, there's only 100 people in this town. If we lose those 4 kids, that's our future. Like, we cannot allow these 4 kids to die. And all because of that town creator. 4 kids dying in a massive city, it's not that. I mean, it's a tragedy.
Tragedy, sure.
It's not a big deal. But literally, with a town of 100 people, we lose those 4 kids. That's our future. We may not be able to procreate.
Right.
Like, it changed the whole perception of the scenario. It no longer was we need to defeat the cryptid. It was we need to save those kids.
Right.
And then worry about the cryptid because we may not have a future. Like, that is what this town builder does. Because when you build it together, you have, like you said, it's a joint thing. We all agree that this is what's important. And the way Nessa put that, it's like that is everything the town builder should be.
Oh, absolutely. And on the GM side, another thing I took this game is me taking from a bunch of other games to a degree is what I loved about playing Blades in the Dark was the crew sheet. All right, we have the crew sheet. We have stats for our crew. So the town building is not just, there's 2 levels to the town building. There's just 10 question prompts. If we don't really want to get into the weeds, we can tell you can have the players in the group, let's just answer these 10 questions and we can go. And that will get you everything that y'all kind of developed. But there's also a town sheet that has stats of its own that mirror your character sheet and how it's set up. And you basically, where a player has what we were talking about, the spell die, your town has a prominence die, which is how prominent are you within the region. And that kind of will inform you of all of the civic paths and how strong they are. So you have your town's defenses, offenses, what kind of luxuries they have. It tells you what kind of indulgences you have or want to have, which is that y'all's town indulged in, I think, or put points into violent sports, which ended up being how y'all decided who was mayor.
Elections.
Decided
It's election day. Everybody beat the shit out of each other. Last person standing's the mayor.
Yay! and that's how all that stuff happened. And so you put points in as a group into all these various things, which then tells the GM what they're focused on as a group, what pain points there can be. It's like, oh yeah, y'all are really got great defenses, but you have no offensive capability, which in a Dead Spaces means you might not be good at gathering resources to maintain your town. So, sending people out to get things to bring back. In y'all's case, y'all have a lot of points in indulgences, which means your town's topsy-turvy, and people coming from outside might have a bad time if they're not aware of what's going on.
I'm pretty sure we put all of our points in indulgences and offense, but we had like no defense. Like
no
we're
water.
very susceptible to being attacked, but if you attack us, you're probably gonna die because we were raiders. We went out and beat up other towns.
I don't think y'all had any points in necessities, which are like shelter, food, and water.
No,
energy.
we didn't. We just
but
we
you
just
have
went
a
and took
McDonald's
it from other settlements.
Do what?
But you have
a
McDonald's.
It was a different one.
Oh,
but we have the McDonald's. But still, it's all those things. And I'll tell you, it's like I had a basic idea of the adventure. It's a one shot I've run several times, but based on those decisions y'all made, changed how I approached the one shot. And there was an NPC y'all just decided to make up, which was like, oh, it's the mayor's right hand man, whatever. And I went, he's the bad guy of this one shot now. He wasn't originally.
We were horrible to him.
Oh,
everybody was so mean to that guy. Like,
and yeah, so I was like, oh, good. He's going to be the one that's behind the whole thing that's happening here. And another time I ran that one shot, basically the people, they decided their one like big thing about them was they had the only quote Walmart, which in this world is the Waltons now run a very large spell emporium and spell goods, and they've cornered the market on spell reagents and all that kind of stuff. But they had a super center. But who was the bad guys behind everything that happened during their stay there was Waltons. They're running some experiment or doing something. Any rate, so that's why I love. We kind of touched on this, I think, prior to recording. That is all in there, but players at a table don't necessarily have to indulge in that stuff or go that deep if they don't want to. The game has enough information to be like, look, if y'all just want to be in a major city and deal with a bunch of crypt like cultists in the city trying to take over, cool. That's what you're going to focus on. We have threat prompts in that section of the book. It's like, look, here are the different types of threats, and here are 5 prompts within all of those threats. And you can get the book right now on itch.io for free, and it has all that stuff in there if you want to go read through it. It's like, hey, do you want to deal with politics? Okay, well, here's the different types of problems you could have with politics in this game. Oh, you want to deal with crypt doors? Okay, well, here's kind of different prompts to get you started dealing with crypt doors. And you can go there, and you can combine them and mesh them however you want. And so you got everything you need.
My character definitely wanted to deal with crypt doors.
So this is players have the ability. When we had talked about the imposition die, depending on how difficult it is, I will set, or the GM will set how difficult that thing. Well, the GM is called the Crypt Keeper, of course. And the Crypt Keeper will set that imposition against the player, and they have the ability to lower that imposition through what they call aptitude, unless what they're trying to accomplish could be so difficult. The Crypt Keeper has the ability to set what's called irresistible imposition. So I don't care how good you are at whatever spell thing you're trying to do, this is beyond anybody's capability. You don't get to lower the difficulty die. And in this case, Dragon was trying to banish that poor little toady into the crypt. Oh, he's the bad guy. I'm going to banish him into the crypt. I was like, well, okay. That's a D12.
Nobody's ever done it before?
No, yeah, you're not going to be able to resist this. And I think you're like, I have a pretty good chance. Complete failure.
I rolled like all ones.
Yeah, I was like a 2 or 3, yeah, and then a whatever. And it's like we talk about in the book, the severity of outcome is what we call how you determine what should happen narratively based on that imposition die. So the higher the imposition die, the more awful that failure is going to be. The lower the imposition die, if you fail, it might be a little small setback, but you're okay. But with a D12, doing all this stuff, I just like, well, yes, you banish him. I gave it to Dragon. I was like, yes, you banish him into the crypt. But to do so, you summoned a crypt door. And it just comes up in the middle of town and opens up, and you push him through. And the problem is, now something on the other side has a way in. And I just talk about this hand reaches out of the crypt door as it starts to pull itself into reality. And those are the things where it's like, sometimes I go, yeah, I'm going to let you get what you want. But but it's not what you want. It's the monkey's paw getting what you want.
The thing was, like, I was like, well, what would my character do here? Okay, my character is notoriously like, he tries to tame cryptids, but if cryptids are out of control, he has no problem eliminating them. Well, this was a human that decided they wanted to use magic to turn themselves into a cryptid. And my character's like, well, if you want to be a cryptid, go back to the realm of the cryptids with the cryptids and see how you like it there. And it was like, oh no, what did I just unleash on our poor town? But
so yeah, and it's again, that's what makes it a great narrative game, is we can just take those things and just, what's the logical outcome? What's the next step in what you're trying to do? It really flows really well that way.
So one of the last things I want to talk about with the Crypt has opened, and because I'm very vocal online and on TikTok about how I don't like failure, because in most games, failure is just you fail. The Crypt has opened. From what I've seen so far, you have made failure interesting because there are a number of things you can do with failure points, their experience that you get through failing. So kind of hit on that. Just give a brief summary of the various things, because to me, as a player who doesn't like failure, that's very important. And I know there are other people out there that feel like I do.
Sure. So one of the early things I put into the game is that anytime you fail a roll, you gain experience. So that is an incentive actually for you to use your spell paths that you're not very good in. Because the greater chance I have of failure, the greater chance I have gaining experience. Because the idea is you learn through failure, not through success. I think we all know that is just being a truism of life. I learn better from when things go wrong because I know what not to do. And
if
so you
ain't failing, you ain't learning.
Yeah, so you're really putting yourself out there. So you gain experience that way. But then I was like, well, okay, well, what can we do with experience? And I really liked what Cypher system does, which is like, hey, yeah, you can use experience to spend to make your character better, or you can spend it in these other ways throughout the session that are interesting. So, in addition to, hey, yeah, you gain experience through failure, well, I can spend the experience, yeah, to increase my character like you want to do, but you can also, in the middle of the game, spend 2 experience points to make something true in the scene. So, the best example I always give with that is you're in a bar fight, you jump behind the bar. Instead of asking the GM, hey, does the bartender have a shotgun? You just say, I'm spending 2 experience points to say there's a shotgun behind the bar. And now it's a true thing that exists. And it has to be logical. It has to be something that would make sense in the narrative. You can't just be like, there's a nuclear bomb back here. Like, no, okay. let's be, logical about this. But people have used it in great ways. Like, I'll spoil one of the playtest scenarios. There are giant and little cotton candy monsters running around, simulacrum, that are fighting everybody. And one of the players is like, I'm spending 2 experience points to say there's a fire hose. Because they were at Coney Island. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense for there to be a fire hose at, one of those ones that like have you seen, what I'm talking about? It's like in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just like wheel it off the
hooked.
wheel and
Yeah.
the wall.
Yep. There's one right there. You're on Coney Island. I'm sure it's hooked into the ocean water. Like, pump it out. I'm like, yeah, it's there. Boom, turns it onto the creatures.
Nice.
So it's doing stuff like that. It gives players agency to be more interactive in the scene, and then to make your town, to increase your town's experience and make it better. For every 4 experience points you spend, you can do that. And that's a thing that is a collective. All players can decide, hey, we're all going to spend 1 experience point. So it's a table of 4. We're all going to spend 1 to increase our town, to make our town better. And so that's how you do that. So those are 3 different ways to spend experience.
And I love it. I love it because, like I said, I'm notoriously ripped apart on social medias because I say failure just sucks. Like you know how it is with trad games. When you fail, it's just a failure. And they're like, "Oh, you can tell a cool story out of it." Well, I can tell a cool story from succeeding too and not have the serotonin drop. There's something good about succeeding and something bad about failing. And a game system that says, okay, yeah, you failed, which sucks, but we're going to give you this experience point. And when you get enough of these, you can do these cool things. It's like, okay, that's kind of cool. Oh, and the only way my character gets better is if I fail. Okay, so I need to fail sometimes because that's the only way to improve. And I like that. I think every game should have some way of doing that. And I also love the way that you tied it into the town as well. So it's, once again, kudos.
Thank you.
I love the Crypt. It's such a good game.
And even beyond just the experience, there's different avenues the GM can use to. There's not just hit points. I think that's another problem with trad games. It's like sometimes failure just isn't even just nothing happens. It's like, well, this number goes down. It's just kind of like, okay, we watch numbers just kind of do this. There's different avenues for the GM to use to turn the narrative. So it's like, okay, you can take some damage. We have a damage track. Or we could suppress a bit of your magical ability for a scene. Or for the next action. Or we can deal with some stress damage. Or we can, there's all these different like buttons and knobs that they can turn and twist to kind of push the scene one way and how much, pressure I want to put on the players and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of tools at their disposal to direct a scene, if you will. And that's what I've been having the most fun as the Crypt Keeper when I'm running these games. It's just like, oh, you know what? I don't want to do damage here. And like I said before, I'm actually going to let you succeed and get what you wanted out of the thing, but the consequences are worse than than if you had just succeeded.
Yeah.
We did a thing with one of my play tests. A person who talks with spirits, they were going to go talk to this businessman in town, and they wanted kind of a little edge on him during the encounter. So they called up a spirit of one of his ancestors. Hey, what kind of dirt can you give us on this guy? And so the old grandpa gives them some dirt. Well, the guy actually failed on the roll, but I gave him the information, stuff. Is like, and then as grandpa the spirit goes back into beyond the crypt. You swear you saw something flip by. Something used that opening to come in. And that's all I said. And then later, when they're fighting the scarecrows during that section, he failed a roll, and I talk about that entity that you saw earlier messed you up. And I kept bringing, every time he failed, I kept bringing how that entity, and eventually he goes, I want to talk to the entity. And it comes in as a, hey, what do you want? And he's like, I want to make a deal with you. Help me do this thing. And sure enough, I was like, that was just a story thing that he picked up on, rolled with. It became this demon that was haunting him that he eventually made a deal with. And then later, when he really needed to succeed at something, the entity says, hey, I'll help you out. And then eventually manifested into reality, said, hey, thanks, bud, and then took off. And it's like, there's a story bit that like now I've got this plot point as a crypt keeper that I've just got hanging out here to do with what I want at a later date. And all the players are just like, oh god, we just brought a demon into the world, and now we're going to deal with that at some point.
That's
like
incredible.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
and yeah. I love that this game lends to that type of storytelling and that type of playing as well. Once again, going back to the name, When Suddenly, I feel like this game perfectly encapsulates that, because anything the players do when there's a failure, you as the DM or the Crypt Keeper can go, when suddenly, and something happens.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. I guess since I've been in a couple playtests and I've seen several remakes of the game already, how has the playtesting process changed the game to what it currently is? Because I know specifically, but I think that's something people out there who have never designed a game would know about, is the playtesting process. And this version of the game that you thought was, okay, this is perfect, this is great, let's go to playtesting. Then you're like, no, everything is dynamically changing to this.
Yeah. How to approach this? The only thing you can do, right? My approach and how I talk to people is like, you first just work on your dice resolution mechanic by yourself. Roll some dice, get it feeling where like, this feels fun, this feels nice, and then put it in front of people in just a very short scenario. I think the very first thing I ran was with my partner, my fiance, and she's like, I want to be a trainer. Is one of the tropes that we use. It's basically a Pokemon trainer. And they want to go around and catch them all. I was like, okay, you're going after Mothman. And that's all we did, is like capture the Mothman. And it was just roll some dice. And she's like, well, I want to, create a trap. I need some reagents. Well, we had no backpack, no item inventory, that kind of thing. And I was like, okay, well, for people that want to know, like, well, how many reagents do I have? Well, how much of this do I have? What's going on? They have these questions while they're playing. And you go, oh, that's a point I didn't think about, that I thought maybe wasn't important, but it is important. All right, so let's have at least some answer to that. It doesn't have to be deep mechanics. And I think that might be where a lot of designers get in the weeds. They'll hear, oh, we don't have an answer to this, and they build this just deep subsystem. Like, you might not need that deep of a subsystem. Just answer the question as lightly and as tightly as possible. If it needs more iteration and if it needs to go deeper, the playtests will tell you that information. Oh, we didn't answer this question with the subsystem. We need to dig a little bit deeper. But for this, it was like all we needed was from Cairn is where I drew inspiration. You've got 10 item slots, which is 2 hands, 2 little belt items, and a backpack. That's your 10 slots. Each item has a heft value, which every point of heft takes up one of those item slots. So if you had a walking stick, it's a heft of 2. Boop. It's in my hands. My hand slots are taken up with my walking stick, kind of a thing. And so that's all we needed. And it's like, okay, reagents. You have enough reagents on you to be a heft of 1, and then through the narrative, we'll decide when you run out. What is most narratively appropriate for when I'm all out of those things? And that answers the question, and we're done. And so
Okay.
that's how those things change. It's just through little slight play tests. You go. The other one is the irresistible imposition that I talked about came about because that player was like, I want to rewind time. And I was like, yeah, normally we have this system where you can lower the imposition. I don't think you should be able to right now. I don't think that should be possible. And that's when that mechanic and that rule came into place. Was like, you know what? I need to have, as the GM, that dial to dial in how difficult something should be. And that's going to be one of my things to go to. So those are 2 examples.
Was there anything that changed in the process so far that kind of broke your heart? Like something you thought was going to be great, and then after through playtest, you're like, okay, I thought this was going to be amazing. It sucks. I have to get rid of it.
So the skill system, and it's still the bane of my playthroughs on everything, is how to do mundane skills. So one of the big things with the Crypt has opened is you are magical practitioners. I want to keep stressing the fact that you use magic on a daily basis. Magic is a part of your life through and through. Why would I ever do anything mundane when I can just rely on magic to solve my problem? Like, why am I climbing this wall when I can phase through it, jump over it, make the wall not exist? Any number of things. I don't need to do whatever. Why do I need the climbing skill? So that's what I've been trying to figure out. Because it's like you still want skills to kind of round out the personality of the character. There still might be things in my backstory, in my history, playing guitar. Like we have polyglot is kind of an example skill. Because there's not a skill list. It's just what the player can determine that a skill they would have. So it's gone through several iterations. One of the things was like, hey, if you think your skill is appropriate for this, you automatically do the thing you want to do. As far as if that skill would be appropriate. So someone was like, hey, I am falling. I've got parkour as one of my skills. All right, you parkour down. You're fine. That felt it just like at first when I first thought I was like, yeah, if you have this mundane skill, yeah, you're just gonna do it. It's great. But in the middle of an action scene, in a tense moment where there's failure on the line, which is interesting narratively, it just took the wind out of that moment. It was like all of us were just kind of like, all right, next, and so, all right, back to the drawing board. Got to figure this out. And still to this day, skills, that is the one that I'm still trying to figure out.
I know the last time I play tested with you, the mundane skills, even as a play tester, they're frustrating because you're magic. You can literally do anything you think you can do. why would I ever use these? But at the same time, if they're not there, it almost feels like it's not complete.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're there, they feel out of place. I feel so bad,
Yeah.
but like, I can see where your frustration comes from
Yeah.
there. But
And maybe, and I'm sitting here as we're talking about this, I just thought, well, maybe it should be a system where instead of a whole separate subsystem, if I use a magical way of overcoming whatever, it allows me a reroll on one of the dice. Maybe that's the way to, it's like I have this skill, this understanding. I don't know. I don't know, man. Because we've used the enchanting school to kind of deal with the skill system. So we were saying like, hey, I'm good at driving, right? I'm really good at driving. Well, someone can enchant driving gloves that make my driving better because we cap the skills die at a really low die level. It can't go past, I think, a D8. So you can never get up to a D10 or D12 in your skill unless you have an enchanted item. Or unless someone gives you like preparations or teas and cookies and things like that. Or hey, here's a Macron, eat this, and it'll increase your climbing ability or make your eyesight better or blah blah blah, whatever the player decides.
Getting Big Trouble in Little China vibes off of that. I love it.
So that's one way we're like, well, that's how enchanting works within the game. But if there's not a lot of times where you're going to be using those skills, does that make enchantment not that interest? You know what I mean? So that's the biggest one that I'm. So it goes to show even how tight a system can be. There will be something that's just like a plague. Just doesn't quite
something that
work.
constantly haunts you.
Yeah, I would like to bring it up. I would even say 5th edition's skill system is in the exact same spot. It's like, what is this? What is this weird tacked on thing? That
I so agree, but
even
we're
in the
not going to
rules
go down that bunny.
Well, I was going to say,
We'll
even though the
start
rules
yelling
itself,
at clouds if we go down that path.
yeah.
But anyway, I think we're at a good point. We've been going for about an hour and a half or longer. I think we're at a good point to settle down. Duality, do you have any final thoughts
Oh,
or any final questions for Jeffrey?
Yeah, so I do have one final question. I think that, a lot of people might be interested in this one. I'd say over the last couple of years especially, there's been a big push for indie games. People coming out wanting to make their own systems. What could you tell those people who are thinking about getting into doing it, but might find the whole process just so overwhelming? What advice do you have for people?
Don't do what I did and start something like this. Start small, because while I did start with the Crypt, if you notice, Weird Dungeon and The Color of Everything technically came out before this, right? So it was like, yeah, I'm working on kind of this larger game, but let me start working on smaller systems, simpler systems, and just get used to iterating and just the design process as far as like how to lay out a book, because that's going to be something you're eventually going to get to, is like what is my process for laying out rules and information, and then how to present that to other people. That's also a big thing, is getting that book into somebody else's hands and having them read it and go, I have no idea how to make heads or tails of what I'm reading here, because the information's ping-ponging all over the place. Because you can talk about major publishers, if you look at their layout of their book, like this layout makes zero. Like we were talking about Shadowrun earlier. Talk about I need to have 5 fingers bookmarking 6 different sections. So if you're getting into it, you could read as many other systems as possible. That would be another big thing. If you've listened to this entire podcast, how many different games did I mention that were inspiration and have their fingers in the Crypt has opened?
A lot.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Yep,
And
a lot.
yeah, and I think some people get afraid, like, no, I can't do that. It has to be completely original, completely new. I don't want to be influenced. Everybody's influenced by everybody. Everybody.
There are very few original ideas, and even the ones that you think are original probably aren't. Someone has probably thought about it, so don't let that stop you either. I guess that's good advice. And honestly, reading all the different systems is just good advice in general if you're running games. You're gonna find stuff that will help every game you play from other systems. Just wanted to throw that in real quick.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Cypher system has been a big turning point in how I run games and approach a game design. Savage Worlds was another big touchstone that really changed how I approach game design. I mean, the reason why I'm using a D4 through a D12 is Savage Worlds, because I love your skills being a die type. You know, whatever your ability is, it's a really quick way to tell how good are you at this thing. You can look at a D4 through a D12 and just be like, I can kind of already just know how good I am going to be at that thing based on the size of that die. And so it's doing that, like we're saying, just read everything, pick up everything, find the things you like, start peeling those out of other systems, and then seeing how they may work with other systems. Like, oh, if I take this and this, that's when you get something new, right? Oh, if I, like we were saying with the color of everything, if I take the dragon die, and if I take the force point system, and I put those together, what do I get? Oh, you get the muse die, and you get the escalation meter out of that, which, if you just read it, may look like something new to other people. Oh, I've never seen this before. Gotcha.
I guess another thing that you mentioned earlier, don't be afraid to completely change direction. Like you said, the Crypt was originally a duel between wizards, and now it's this. And it's dynamically different from that original concept. So don't be afraid to change what you're thinking. Like, if you've got a really cool idea and everything you're doing is like, this isn't working, but this is still really cool, what can I adapt this to?
Yeah. And it's not to say I won't ever go back to trying to figure that problem out. You know, well, okay, that it didn't work. That game didn't solve that problem. But can I come up with a different game that is going to solve that problem? And you kind of keep tinkering that, and who knows, you might come out with a different. Well, that still didn't solve it, but I got this game instead of it. So it's kind of following the mechanics. It's following the feeling. We talked about, I didn't do any math on the very beginning of this. Like, a lot of people are like, I'm going to approach my dice system to make sure the dice resolution mechanic to make sure it's mathematically perfect and great. My advice is don't. Just roll the dice. How does it feel? Do you feel like it's achieving what you want it to achieve? Is it fun to play? Then, and this is how I ended up doing, then try to do the math and tweak it tweak it from there. And that's where I thank you so much to one of our great friends. Holy crap. My brain just farted. Tetrapeg Academy.
Penny,
thank
Scorch,
you.
right?
Yes. Oh my God. She's gonna kill me.
Penny.
You're editing this, right?
No, actually, we just released this completely raw.
I'm dead. Penny, you can beat me up later.
Awesome.
Anyway, so Penny took my dice system and wrote a script for it. And then I
remember when she did that.
And so I was able to finally plug all the numbers in and be like, give me 1,000 rolls with this dice combination. and it would spit out the percentages of all those things.
I remember that.
And,
It was in the group chat we were in.
Yeah, and so I was actually able to pit the new dice system against the old dice system. What percentages of failures, mixed success, and success am I getting from the two systems? Because of the old system, while convoluted and hard to describe, if the percentages were better or more what I wanted out of the game, I would have stuck with that, even if it was harder to explain. That was the differentiating factor. It was like, even though it's easier, it's harder to describe, if we're getting the feeling out of the game, once we all understand the resolution mechanic, and as it's flowing, if it flows better, then that's what we're going to go with. But
I'm glad the one that won and flows better, because it is so simple to explain, and it's such a good mechanic. Like I said, I have a feeling that it is going to be the next Forged in the Dark, the next PBTA. Your system is. I have faith that that's what it's going to be.
Well, I've already started thinking about how, because it's the imposition dice system, I've already been like, well, what's a medieval like fighting version, like just arms and armor version of this look like? And then I realized, okay, that's what that would. Oh, it still works with Crypt. Like, I can still take the Crypt is opened themes and all the magic, and then take this theme, put them in the same game, and they work exactly the same. I don't have to change a whit of the mechanics. And I think
maybe just some words.
Just some words. But I think that's going to be the power of it, is just being able to drop your theme on it and change some things around and go to town.
So I guess final question, are you still doing open playtests? If people contact you, will you run a game of the Crypt for them? Because I know for a while there it was, if anybody contacted you, you were running a game for them. Is that still an ongoing thing?
Yes. I was trying to do it every Tuesday. It's kind of in flux, but I'm hoping to get something that's going to be a weekly Monday game. But again, I'm first trying to get through the name change and get all the new marketing stuff finished, and then we'll do that. But what I would say is, again, the book, all the rules are on the itch. So right now it's happyjackgames.itch.io. That'll be changing soon. So it'll probably be winsuddenlygames.itch.io. And try one of those two, and grab the Crypt is opened, grab the rules, and you can run it at your table if you want to. You don't necessarily need me to run it. And if you do, let me know. What I would love to hear at this point is other people playing without me involved. That's actually big part of the playtest I haven't, gotten around to yet, is seeing what it's like when I'm not there to listen in or help or clarify. It's just the people and the book.
Well, I will say, if anybody is watching, reach out to Dragon X on TikTok. I will gladly run it for you as well. I want to help Jeffrey in any way possible, and I think it's going to be wonderful. It's a wonderful system.
I think we should host a game on the Ronin's Den channel. Start a couple sessions up for it.
Oh, that'd be great.
I will definitely run those. But yeah, we are at almost 2 hours. Yep. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. This was a wonderful talk. Nothing against you, Jeffrey, but we're kind of at that over where we like to be. So we're probably gonna end it right now. Jeffrey, once again, thank you for coming and talking to us. It was great to hear your insights and your thoughts. Go ahead, Duality.
I was going to say thank you so much for joining us. This was great. I really hope we can get together again in the future, do this another time.
Anytime.
Do you want to give everybody where they can find you again right before we close out?
Yeah. So at this point, winsuddenly.games, the website is actually up and live. And now, since I've made that announcement, I'm going to be slowly turning over all of, Twitter and Blue Sky, Threads. Let's see what other social media version of Twitter is there now. TikTok is really kind of where I do most of my stuff these days. And I'm trying to think, we do have a Discord. It'll be When Suddenly Games Discord. Reach out to me, Jeff at whensuddenly.games. You can just email me, and I can send you. It's an open link because we're just a community Discord server. It's there to. I run my games there, but if anybody wants to run games on there, you can use that Discord to host those things. We're also on startplaying.games. If anybody's familiar with that, I don't know if y'all have talked about that here.
Haven't talked about it, but I am familiar.
Okay. But I've got a lot of times I use Start Playing to put together play tests, and that way I can grab people who might just be on Start Playing looking for something new. And there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This has been awesome. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up like the dragon said. Everybody have a great night, and we will catch you again next week on another episode of Ronin's Den.
Thanks for coming.